7:03 p.m. on March 18th, 2024. I will call the Board of Health meeting to order. And since this is a virtual meeting, what I'd like to do first is that the board members who are present, go around and announce. Daryl Beardsley present.
Matt Beavers present.
Julie Dreyfus present.
Okay. The next item is whether we have any items to potentially be added to our agenda if they were not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting. You have possibilities.
I do. I think we should add a discussion about meeting minutes as we are without an administrator at the time. We should make a plan.
I agree with that. And then the one other thing I was going to say is the Wednesday night meeting agenda. I did forward around an email from the ZBA about what they were planning, but that is a loose agenda and might be changing. So I don't even know if we need to add it if everyone's seen that.
Yeah, that's probably okay. So I think the item to add is a plan for meeting minutes. And that's it. So do I have a motion to add a discussion of meeting minutes to tonight's agenda?
So moved.
And I will second it.
Seconded.
All right. There are just three of us, so we'll have to compete. Any discussion of that? Hearing none, Matt Beavers, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right. So I think we have homeowners from 34 Greenwood here. So I thought we would start with that, with under agents business. Then I was going to try to sort of knock out the smaller other business items before we move on to the 40B discussions.
Yeah, no, that if the board's okay with that, that would be great.
Okay. Do you want to Mark, give us an overview of 34 Greenwood, and I will, there's going to be a lot of flipping back and forth on the screen sharing tonight. So I will pull up the existing floor plans of that while you maybe introduce the issue.
Yep. And just so the board knows, we received a building application to do some modifications at the house at 34 Greenwood. And in reviewing the house, it appears that the previous person prior to the new owners here built the house different from what was required for a 5-bedroom house, a 5-bedroom septic. I met Meredith, one of the homeowners who's here tonight. I met her about a month ago now and explained that the previous builder never received his certificate of compliance for the house that he built and lived in. And I don't even believe he received a certificate of occupancy from the building commissioner, because I spoke to Chris Canny and he said it appears that way. So unfortunately, they're in a house that never had its final inspections by our department or the building department. And in looking at the floor plans that are being shown, we can do the room count, and then unfortunately we have to, make some decisions on what can and cannot happen here. But the house itself has 5 bedrooms on the original. Just so the board knows, the original building plan showed 4 rooms on the second floor, 4 bedrooms. On the upper right, you'll see a bedroom. It's the center part of the what's being shown right now. You're right there. Yeah, that bedroom was not there. That was a closet to the other bedroom on the bottom of the right side, as shown by the original building plans, which were on the building application when I looked at it. And so unfortunately, the previous owner builder built a bedroom there. And then on the 3rd floor, which we didn't have any plans of either until the new owner shared it with us, is you'll see there are 2 finished rooms on the 3rd floor. And in the the 1st floor, the board can, I see it as a 4-room 1st floor, but I feel the eating area is open to the kitchen, but I'll let the board decide on that. But if that's 4,
I agree with that.
Okay, thank you. And if the 2nd floor is 5, there's 9. 3rd floor, either 1 or 2, there's 10 or 11. And then we have the lower level, which appears to have a walk-in down near the gym, and a mudroom is the way it was described. And I feel that, we're going to need to do not just bedroom count here, but also room count.
And it's a 5-bedroom system.
Yes, it is. Put in around 2010. 2009 to 2010 is when the applications were being drawn.
The house, I think the house was built in 2005, though, just to let you know. I don't know what would result in that discrepancy, but just as a heads up. And also I can say, if you look at the closets on the basement, I think if you came and looked at that closet, the one that's closer to the smaller storage, you would, it's not, I mean, you can stand in it, but I don't think one would call it a walk-in. Just, I don't think that's gonna be the most important point, but.
The closets don't matter.
Okay.
So that's fair.
Yeah.
So
Oh, go ahead.
for room count for me, I mean, I get on the first floor, one family room, 2 dining room, 3 sort of eat-in kitchen, 4 studies. So I think at least 4 on the first floor, clearly 5 on the second. I think even generously, is this third floor all one open space here?
It is all one open space. And
Okay.
I added the Zillow link if you wanted to see the original real estate photographs that were published at the time of purchase. So you can see, it really is, you can see straight through. There's a wall just really to hold electrical switches, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Okay. So that I then am at 10 before the basement, which is at least 2, maybe 3. So I'm at sort of at least 12 rooms. I don't know what others think.
I would come out to at least 11 rooms. I guess I view that L shape in the basement as one. Labeled
And then I'm
separately.
counting the gym as 2.
Yeah, yeah.
So 2 in the basement, 4 on the first floor is 6, 5 on the second floor is 11, 1 on the third floor is 12.
Yep.
I agree with that count as well. That's how I'd look at it.
And that's a count that
Sorry,
our contractor came up with was 12.
I guess I was already leaping ahead to what I would consider deed restricting, but I guess the harder part for me is the 5 bedrooms on the second floor.
Yeah.
And even looking at the third floor as one room that's bedrooms. We've never deed restricted something, or maybe not never, but not in many, many, many years, since the very early days when this whole deed restriction thing was being worked out. But for a long time, we've been limiting it to rooms in the basement, meeting certain criteria.
I agree. I mean, I think by our bedroom count, this is at 6 bedrooms. The 5 on the second floor, and then the third floor counts as a bedroom.
And I could see things that could happen in the basement. So what's labeled as gym, does that have any windows in it?
No.
And I think I remember on the old plans that little door across from the gym entry, that's a walkout onto ground level.
It's a space underneath the screen porch on the first floor, and it is outside directly out that door. So it's like a little storage area.
But it's right out to ground. It's not like up a set of stairs or anything outside, or a bulkhead outside that door.
You have to take a couple stairs that are, it's like decking type stairs. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 stairs up, and then landing, and then maybe 3 steps up to get to what is considered ground floor.
Okay.
I could take a picture.
Are there windows in that room at all on that back wall?
This billiard room.
The only windows are the ones that are shown in the diagram there, the playroom at the wells, with the little, there are window wells there. So they're, at eye level and above.
Well,
so I think the basement could probably be addressed by deed recording because of sort of those things, because none of that is really, I mean, there's no real egress down there. The one door, I guess, but but the third floor is the more problematic one.
Yeah. Or the combo of the second and third floor.
Yeah. And
Which
so what are
options had-
what are we looking to do here?
I was going to add that this all started with the process of looking at a kitchenette in the basement. And I think Chris Canny, the building commissioner, had the applicants bring it down to a wet bar. But do
Mhm.
we have that plan available too? So you can see what they
I
originally came
might.
into that, and then we had to do a room count. So maybe we
Yeah, I
can,
think I have it.
now that you have the
Got
base.
a basement for building application.
Yes.
Give me 1 second.
Oh.
Already missed out. All right.
Yes, there we
So
go.
this is the proposed. Like, hang on, I gotta shrink it or I can't see it. There we go. So basically the proposal is adding a bathroom.
Yes. And a kitchenette to the right of it.
But we don't have to
Okay.
do that. I mean, like I said in the email I sent, I mean, I'm a home brewer, so I just wanted to move as much of that
Yes.
into the basement as possible. And if I can't have, like the stove to do the beer, that's fine with me. I can still do that upstairs. But
But
we
I'm
just
the-
glad
want
you
the
added
septic.
that to it.
With that?
That was the intent of the applicant, is the home brew.
I mean, the main issue is the bathroom because that's a three-quarter bath down there would make that a bedroom. And so I think you can't, there's sort of no way to, I mean, it's hard. It's going to be, you can't do the bathroom unless you eliminate 2 bedrooms somewhere else, basically. I mean, I think a stacked washer and dryer and a utility sink or like a wet bar like that, I think is not in and of itself an issue. The bathroom becomes a problem because then that becomes easily just sort of turn this into an in-law suite,
Mhm.
some future owner.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it seems like the sort of 2 issues are adding the bathroom would create another bedroom. It's already at 6 bedrooms. Adding a bathroom would put it to 7 bedrooms. And so you'd have to find a way to eliminate at least 1 bedroom sort of no matter what. And if you do the bathroom, you'd have to eliminate another bedroom somehow.
Well, then what's the other alternative is expanding the septic system. So that's why I sent you
Right.
that last meeting. So if you could tell us what that would be.
Yeah, and you would qualify to be able to do that as long as it fits the distance constraints and so forth, because the system was built after 1995 and I know you had a Title V done 2 years ago on it or a year ago. I
Must have
believe.
been because it did pass before we at least I think I mean this is all kind of like I mean my guess is that in order for the sale to go through, it did pass that.
Yes, Meredith, when did you buy it? What year did you buy this?
2020.
Yeah, I thought it was a couple years ago. So, but still, hopefully the system's been taken care of as it passed back in 2020. But that's another option by all means, is to update the septic system as long as you have. If you go to 6 or 7 bedrooms, you'd have to have 60 or 70,000 square feet. So, I don't know how many acres you're on.
Total, yeah.
Yeah, we're on. Well, I sent Mark something. You can even kind of look at the schematic that I have available, and this is what I was looking at when I even noticed.
I mean, I think we're not going to be able to sort of answer the question of whether
okay.
the septic.
But
Like
so
you need
we
an
have
engineer for that, but
yeah, I mean, it has
the-
expansion area. It has
yeah, but I think sort of the key question is how big is your lot? Is it a 1 acre, a 2 acre, or a 3 acre lot?
I think it's at 2 point. Let me tell you. Hang on.
If you have 2 acres, you can have 8 bedrooms. So that
Yeah.
okay.
So if you have 2 acres is fine. That's enough to expand
It's
it
over
to
2.
6. Yeah. So that 2 acres gives you the space, but then you'd have to go to an engineer and see if they could design it to expand on it and in a Title V compliant way.
So
And
can you add to the existing if it's in perfectly good shape?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
And just so you know, though, that reserve area was separated for a future repair system, but you could add on either side as long as you're not too close to your well or any abutting wells, and wetlands or the other distance constraint that we always look at, and property line. But an engineer, as Matt just noted, could be very helpful in letting you know if there's a possibility of adding on to your system to
2.43.
have
Thank
to
you.
handle the house. Unfortunately, you didn't build this house, so you bought it, and
No,
it is out of compliance, unfortunately, from what the previous builder did.
that's okay. We're on friendly terms with him, so I'll give him a hello
Yeah,
as
let him know
well.
he kind of went a little overboard here.
Well, it was his own house. I mean, we've had a lot of
Yes.
good luck buying contractors' houses. So it's been our kind of standard operating procedure. So
But
we can
adding
make it
on
nice
to
for
the
themselves.
septic system is a great option if you have it.
Okay, okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Other questions we can
where
answer
you
for
are.
now, or does that give you?
No, we'll have to look into things for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, the other option would be to combine rooms on the second floor to make like big bedrooms. But yeah, so those are sort of your choices.
Yeah, okay. Okay, and if we
Or
did go with
like a
what's
second
here,
suite.
minus anything that would be, make it a kitchenette rather than a wet bar, we would
So
just have to.
the kitchenette is less of an issue than the bathroom.
Okay, yeah, but so if we were to make it a 7-bedroom
If you're
place,
making a 7-bedroom, you could put a bathroom down here.
okay,
If you make it a 6-bedroom, you can do all the other renovations, but you can't put a bathroom down here.
okay, okay,
I mean, obviously we'd have to see the plans, like to be sure, but that's in
yeah, yeah,
the
And this
concept.
is where the kitchen level might be an issue from the ZBA of whether they start to view that as a possible accessory unit and whatever the rules are there. So that we don't get into. But if it starts to look like a full kitchen, then we would end
Well,
up calling it a kitchen, which would add another room.
in all honesty, and this is beyond what you need to go over, we have a 6-year-old with Down syndrome, and we bought the house thinking that we would slowly convert, or maybe soon, not soon, but have it to be his like semi-independent living space. That really is
Okay.
one of our long-term interests in
Okay.
this particular house. But if it looks like that's not a possibility, but that would be something to bring up with the zoning board. So I'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And Meredith, feel free to stay in touch and we can go from there. Have your contractors or anyone else give us a call as well. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
All right. So next, I would like to tackle the nomination of the animal inspector. I assume Kimberly Morrow is willing to continue to be the animal inspector, unless anyone knows otherwise.
Do not know differently. So.
Okay.
And I know before Ellen left, she did speak with her. So.
Okay. And then we also need to figure out who the nominating authority is going to be, since it's not Ellen.
Right. I don't know what the rules are for that. Probably be a board member or possibly Jean.
Yeah, the nominee can be anyone from the Board of Health or whoever you wish to designate, and then the state actually approves the person in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I'd like to just check with Jean. I think she would
Okay.
be best because for any questions coming in,
yeah.
she would be the right kind of.
I think that makes the most sense. So do I have a motion to once again nominate Kimberly Morrow as the inspector of animals for Sherborn?
So moved.
Seconded.
All right. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. Matt Beaver's aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right. And then do I have a motion to name Jean Greco as the nominating authority, assuming she consents to do so?
So moved. With that
Seconded.
condition.
Sounds good. Any discussion on that one? Hearing none. Matt Beaver's aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right. Next up, we have, hang on, I'm flipping between screens. We'll do the disposal works renewal application. This is for FP King Excavating. Mark, any concerns there? Mark, you're muted. I don't know if you're trying to answer me.
Sorry, just gave you a whole presentation. The person's name is Fred King, and he's worked very well with our department, and I would have no problem with this being approved.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the renewal of the disposal works installer permit for FP King Excavating conditional to pre-construction conference?
So moved.
Seconded.
All right. Any more discussion? Hearing none. Matt Beavers, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right. Okay. So I think those are the short ones. So let's talk about Farm Road Homes 40B.
Do you want to talk about, Matt, did you want to leave the meeting minutes to the end?
Oh, no, we can do that. That's a good idea.
I don't have any suggestions.
So we have no
because
minutes to prepare.
Yeah, we have no minute. Daryl and I had reviewed the AI summary, of which we both found it confusing and completely lacking.
Yeah.
And the direct transcript is equally bad. So.
Right. Neither one of those can be relied upon. So I think, I hate to say this, but if staff is not able to do it, it's board members who are expected by the state to fulfill the obligation. And maybe we have a streamlined version of notes. And there are some other boards and committees now saying go to the recording of the meeting on YouTube or whatever path they want to take to it to get the details. And we capture the basics, at least until we have staff again.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like our only option, right? I mean, is it doesn't seem like Jean has the time.
No, not yet. No, she won't.
Yeah.
There's a lot that she's keeping afloat right now.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So in the past, when Ellen had been out on a medical leave, I think you guys divvied it up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that correct? I wasn't there.
No, we had the volunteer graduate students.
Yeah, we had like the interns doing it.
Right.
And they used the AI summary, and it was
arrangement.
not great.
Oh, so we've already done that. Okay.
Yeah.
But it seems like this should not be, even to take turns. I think dividing up the agenda items, and just sum up the agenda items, divide them up, would be kind of the most fair way, economical way. I'm not sure how you want to put that.
Yeah, there's something I have to say. I've been so flat out with things, I can't even conceive of adding this in right now. It's terrible, but
Daryl,
a lot going on.
I do not recall if anyone on the board remembers open meeting law. What is our timeline for approving meeting minutes?
They liked it to be by the next meeting, but we have more meetings than many boards and committees, or they say 2 meetings out, and we're pretty good compared to most have been until this time with providing hours in a very timely fashion. But they are a lot of work because we are a regulatory board and we do often refer to the minutes for guidance for future decisions so that we're being as consistent as possible across all different things. And there's some historical context and also some of the history benefits, evaluations of properties to be able to look back and see how things progressed at a property, which is more often than not helpful to the current property owner.
And
But-
future.
So that's what we're trying to capture.
Yeah.
You know what? I just realized. Thursday, there's another Charles River Health District meeting. I'm going to ask if they have somebody who could do minutes.
That would be great.
That would be amazing.
It would be.
Okay. So let's
I was just thinking
plan.
of my schedule this week and where was any free time, and then I
Yeah.
thought of that, and so okay, I will.
Well,
ask.
let's plan for that, and if that fails, then for tonight's meeting at least, Julie, you and I maybe can split it up.
Sure, sounds good. We have the 6th, is that correct? And then the and today. Was there another
Yeah, I was not at the last one.
Okay.
And for tonight's meeting, for what we're going to be discussing, since I'll be going off of notes, maybe those notes could help too.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also have 2 board members who are not present, so maybe they would be willing to participate and help.
Yeah, I was going to nominate them to split up the one on the 6th since they're not here and I wasn't there.
That only seems fair.
So I think short-term plan is let's find out on Thursday if somebody can help do minutes from the recordings and transcripts, even though they're horrible. And if not, Gerald, you'll follow up with us by email and we will divvy it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Make sure you emphasize our desperation, Daryl, when you talk to Charles River, please.
Okay. I think I could capture that desperation just fine. So.
I believe you can.
All right. So now that I'm looking back at the agenda, that was the only item that wasn't written on the agenda. Of the other written items, I mean, I guess we could have a brief discussion of BOH staffing status since that's related to this.
Yes.
Why don't we just roll right into that?
Yes. Ads were posted. I think we've received a total of 7 now, I think. Or 8. I think another one just came in. Kind of had 8 applicants.
I thought it was
lost track.
the
Anyway, 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Some didn't look like good matches. They were oriented towards more urban areas and not to well and septic, which is what dominates our business, or the largest section of what we do. And then there were some very promising looking candidates, and so Julie and I and town HR are going to do the first pass at interview, and then whatever comes out with that we'll share with the board and then figure out how to proceed. It's a little tricky to interview people with a whole board.
Yeah.
Then it's an open meeting and broadcast, and
Well, I think
there are other avenues, but we
Yeah.
could just talk about what the board would prefer to do, so think about that.
Well, I thank both of you for taking that on. That's a big task, an important one. Easy for me to say because I will not be on the board by the time that person starts, so I will put my full faith in you to make the right decision.
It motivates
I
us
was
more,
hoping you'd
Matt.
say you're willing to interview for the job.
Yeah. It's just what I need.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so we'll come back with feedback and potentially recommendations for next steps.
Right now, I'm considering us lucky that we got some intriguing applications because lots of towns across Massachusetts have been having a very hard time, to the point where MAHB was getting contacted by a lot of towns, and it's been kicked up to the Department of Public Health level to look at what the supply is of people for the field.
Well, then I think we're definitely lucky to have 7 or 8, even if just a few of them are sort of ideal.
Yeah. We're
I
very
mean, they all
lucky.
sounded good, but their interests were, maybe more of
Right.
the community health outreach, and that's not a big part of what we do.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, and so interviews are happening soon?
Yes,
First round is
some are starting Friday.
Great. All right, hopefully the minutes problem is short-lived among, the million other problems that Ellen kept moving.
Mhm.
All right. I think we can delay it no further. Shall we talk about Farm Road Homes?
Let's do it.
Daryl, I was going to pull up the last email you sent to the applicant because I think that nicely sort of frames the outstanding issues and the information. Does that seem reasonable?
Sure.
And then do you want to sort of comment on it maybe?
Yeah.
All right. So these were the, I think, 5 or 6 sort of major issues that you identified, or we sort of jointly, but you had put together,
And
identified.
Mark, yeah.
Yes, you and Mark mostly for the remaining issues. I don't know if you want to just sort of briefly summarize.
Sure. First thing I'd like to say, though, is a little bit of background is one of the things, and most of these pertain to whether the septic system is compliant with Title V. Because we've talked about the water issues to some degree, and then there's a debate about public versus private supply there. They're both feasible. In any case, so for this one, some of these issues are going to be mixed with our concerns, and then there's overlap with concerns that the peer reviewer has. In terms of just the straight Title V compliance that we usually see, since septic is what we do, we know it, deep knowledge of that. It's not outside of our reach for analyzing the septic systems. What's been tough on this one is that there's been a lack of transparency about the data and the methodologies being used. They seem to be different than what we've standardly seen. And then it trips over into the areas that we are not as experienced with, and that would be mounding analyses and nitrogen loading analyses. So we've seen them, we've dealt with them, but only on a couple, 3 occasions. So that we were definitely looking towards the peer reviewer and others for input. And there were some things that we could analyze enough, but not all the way to the last detail. And also how specific methods compared one to another and what their different pros and cons were. And peer reviewer has since weighed in on that as of what was posted Saturday morning.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. And then the other major thing with the Title V review were that elements of the plans were missing, or they were difficult to see clearly because there's so much layering of information on the plans that you try to read what the test pit findings were for elevation, and because of all the layers, the numbers get covered up by other grayscale and what have you, and it was just possible to tease out. So in any case, so here are some of the key things. And profiles are basically looking at the systems as they would appear if you could cut through the soil and look at where the trenches, where the ground surface is, where the trenches are, what the soil types are, and where is groundwater relative to that. And especially because these are going to be step trenches, which means that they're not on a level surface, they're following the contour of a hillside. And so that gets more complicated to look at that. And it's also very important to have these profiles because it helps confirm that the separations are proper. And that wasn't provided, although it's been provided for, and Mark could speak to this, pretty much all other step trench systems in town, and even systems that do not have step trenches. So just a very standard thing. It was also recommended by the peer reviewer that that would be appropriate. And the claim at one point was that the data was there and that we could create our own, but I think that's not appropriate because we're a reviewing body. So we don't want to be the designing body or the one that's laying it out and claiming that we know some sort of appropriate, proper representation of what they're intending to build. Our job is to review it. So that would be a conflict in my mind to do that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
other-
Also, it's just bottom line, it's not our job to do the design for them, right? Like
Right.
conflict or
And
no, like we're supposed to review for compliance. This is information we need to review for compliance. They should be able to supply it.
And also, Mark, you could speak to it also, but I found that there was sometimes conflicting information within the reports that had been provided, and so knowing which was the final number that was used was not always clear and was taking a lot of time to figure out, and having these kinds of profiles would certainly help with that. The
I
ones
agree.
that are also very difficult, thank you, to understand are, given the different buildings and the multiple wells and the septic system and electrical lines running around and what have you, being able to see how there are requirements for separation between a water and a sewer line, for example.
Exactly.
Which makes sense, very important, and these kind of profiles would really help clarify whether those are correct. And again, the peer reviewer had some very specific comments about the kinds of things they would also want in those profiles, details about the construction and the materials surrounding the pipes and that kind of thing. So that is a deficiency. We've been asking for these profiles for months, I would say, and they keep saying it's not necessary, but it is necessary for us to do what we're obligated to do, which is confirm compliance, and to also have them present more details defining what they're going to be doing, which I think would be a benefit to those who would be working on the site and installing, to have those profiles for reference. So they have value throughout the whole process.
And clear
And
details, clear details that are on profiles. And you mentioned the crossover of the sewer lines, the septic lines, and the water lines. Those should be on cut through profiles with descriptions of the soil for each section that they're planning to cross over those sewer lines. And that's not provided. And it would make it easier. It might end up being more than 7, 9 sheets, but that's okay. It's better to have clear details and not crowding of details. And I think Tetra Tech also noted that the plans are very busy and trying to put too much on one sheet, basically.
Yes, and what was the other? Oh, we were Deshang was talking about the buoyancy of tanks last meeting, but there's some other, it's not only the buoyancy, it's also separation of groundwater and the inlets, outlets, that sort of thing. We've talked about that in the past. So that's another thing that's very important, to be able to see the profile.
And, they're using data that was not observed by the Board of Health up near the tank area. I think it would be important that if he's planning to use sewer line test pit, I think it's 2. I actually have it in my notes here, 2, which wasn't observed. Then maybe go back out there and maybe do a couple tests, one in the septic tank area and one in the field area right now while groundwater is at a very high level, and see if it's still that way, that the groundwater that was seen is still the same as what we may find at this high groundwater season. I would say no later than April 30th. But again, I don't know if the applicant or the engineer is interested in that, but I can't state that I observed any deep holes up in the septic tank area. It might help to confirm the other data that our logbooks are in disagreement.
Mhm. I think that would be completely useful. I mean, at the end of the day, like if we haven't had an opportunity to observe everything and we don't have detailed information, we can't make a judgment, right?
Right.
And it's in their interest to have us make a judgment, because I think the default assumption is going to be that we can't approve something if we don't have the info. Okay, so we need adjustments to the plans. We need sort of potential observation of that additional test pit, and that may help us address some of the, I think it was in item 4 on this email too, where there were some discrepancies between your field observations, Mark, and what they had recorded.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So then item 2. The system that they're planning on using is a step detect star system, which currently has provisional approval as a general class of brand model treatment. So provisional, and I think we spoke about it at a prior meeting about the issues around provisional approval. There are a variety of requirements, including ongoing monitoring. The reason it's called provisional is that the systems are somewhat tested, but not thoroughly tested, and not in the long term. And so there has to be, the provisional systems provide an opportunity to continue to gather data about the systems, but they also provide tracking about whether they are performing appropriately. And then if they don't perform appropriately, the owners have to fix that, which could often mean replacing that whole portion of this specialized treatment system, or adding on to it, or something else unknown, which we've discussed would be a hardship potentially for people there, because it's unlikely that these problems are going to appear in the early stages of use. So it's likely not to fall on the developer, but to fall on the future occupants and owners.
Can I add to that, Daryl, for a second?
Yes.
Also, reading the provisional use, it makes very clear that as the Board of Health, as the regulatory body overseeing this, there has to be clear ownership at all times that the system is in place. And so I don't feel like that has been provided by the applicant. And then, and continuing what you also said in terms of, in the event that this provisional system fails, they have to have a reserve. And we have not seen any, well, they have the reserve depicted. We have not seen any details about what that reserve system would be, if that's a recirculating sand filter, whatever it might be, but it has to be nitrogen reducing in order to meet the nitrogen loading for the site. And I have not seen any details about that reserve. I don't know if anyone else has seen it, but I've just seen it marked on the plans. That's it. And so that would be my concern as well, is in the event the system failed, who is responsible and what is the backup plan, quite simply.
That's a very good point, and it is required. So, and especially since this is provisional, that's why it's required. So I haven't seen anything to answer your question, Julie.
I'm trying to keep up.
There's a lot.
So, okay, then the other issue is, and this is the important one for the nitrogen loading analyses, is that they have used in the modeling the 19 milligram per liter value for total nitrogen in the effluent post going through this treatment system that they're proposing to get the nitrogen down so that they aren't limited to 4 bedrooms per acre. They're counting on the 5 bedrooms per acre. So in the details of the provisional use approval, that 19 is available to systems that are less than 2,000 gallons per day in size. This one's at 7,000 something. And furthermore, nothing has been this. Well, you have to use 25 for the over 2,000. However, this is not a standard over 2,000 system. This is going to be it's called an engineered system, which means in this case that they're planning to put in 3 of the treatment units in series, meaning one after the other, to get up to a different level of performance. But that has not yet been approved by Mass DEP. So we can't even approve this until there is an approval out there for us to then review the conditions of. It's not clear what the conditions will be. There would just be too much speculation, in my opinion, for us to do any kind of approval on this.
Yeah.
Just because they might change what that estimate is of total nitrogen concentration coming out of the system. It could be number of years of testing. It could be things about the reserve area or what might be amended. There's no way to know, really. Or it might look just like what the ones look like now, but we don't have any insight into that at the moment. So another reason that we can't really proceed, not to mention that they would have to use a minimum value of 25 milligrams per liter, assuming the approval that came out looked anything like the current. So another three.
And Daryl, just because I know there are a lot of people on the call who probably have not spent as much time looking through all these details as we have, that what they had used in their nitrogen loading analysis was the 19, not the 25. That's my recollection, just so people understand why we're focused on these numbers.
So that means a little over 25% increase on the loading above what had been estimated in the modeling they were doing. Mark, do you want to talk about the comparison wells?
Yes. The site itself that first of all, the comparison well is for the groundwater adjustments that we utilize, and that's with the FRMTA methodology. And it's to see comparisons to what's been observed at a United States Geological Survey well, because the data on those wells are every month, sometimes every hour, and we can compare to what might be happening at the site. Unfortunately, for till wells, there's not many in this area. The closest is Winchton, which is up at the New Hampshire-Vermont line in Massachusetts. And also we have one, I believe, up on the North Shore. And outside of that, we being the USGS originally had a monitor well, a USGS well in Dedham, but they closed that one down. In past, this has become a problem because you're not in the same rain belt and so forth, to the same precipitation. And so what engineers have done is they'll look at other wells, and the well in Concord and Acton are sometimes looked at. They're on a terrace, but at the same time, they have the soils at those two wells closer to what we have here, which is, from my field notes, from my observations, we have a loomy sand to a sandy loam mix here. And I was going to see if the engineer, if not, I can try to do a few FRMTA calculations to see how it compares to those two other USGS wells that are closer to Sherborn, although not completely in till, but more of a mix as we see at this site. It kind of goes out to a little bit of a terrace after it comes down that steep hill. So I think those two wells might be advisable in looking at them using the same range that we've been using here. It's an assumed range for the site, a range throughout the whole year, which is 10 feet, and see how it may look according to the data collected in Acton and Concord at those two 2 USGS wells. And if any questions, feel free. I hope I didn't complicate it.
No, that was helpful, Mark. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'll continue to interject. And just, I'm recognizing that everyone is not reading this. And Daryl, one of the things that I know you and I noted was that in the peer review or the Tetra Tech review, they seem to feel like this issue was resolved, but I think we do not feel satisfied by that result, is what we're saying here.
Yeah, and Julie, if I can add to that, I read Tetra Tech's letter after responding to these comments, and they were the ones that brought it up first, and they weren't too far off because the distance for where Winchendon is compared to Acton and Concord, it is a distance, and it could affect a decent, I don't want to say decent, but a more accurate groundwater adjustment. So it's good to look at some other wells to see if it's especially when it comes to the rain belt and seeing if their wells may give the same answers. So, but I know Tetra Tech, I saw said they felt it was resolved.
Yeah. I think it's important.
This is one where, unlike the construction of the profiles for the site features, this one I would be okay with you doing because the data that you use from site fieldwork, one you observed the relevant pieces, and the rest is looking at USGS data and doing the calculations, which I think is much more straightforward than the profiles of the site. So if at some point we decide that
I can do that,
comparison
Daryl.
would be good, just as double checking, I think that would be worthwhile.
I'd be glad to do that.
It's a chance it'll come out about the same, but it would be good to do, I think. Is that okay with the other board members?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think it also, this is a case where it's reasonable for sort of us and Mark on our behalf to do our own calculations, and because I think there is also probably it sounds like there's disagreement about the appropriate way to do this, and so I think it's fine for us to do it and see how different it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would resolve the issue in our mind if we saw nominal differences, but
yeah,
if it's significant, then I think we'd bring it forward.
Yeah. Mark, do you want to comment on
the robustness of the design? Check. I'm done.
I was going to ask Mark if you want to comment on item 4 also, the groundwater data, since it sounds like
You mentioned it earlier. I truly believe the best situation would be if the client was willing to go out and dig a deep hole where I had not observed any deep holes, and that's up at the tank area. They did some test holes without me being there, but I think it's important. I don't even think their consideration when they were out there was to do them for the septic tank locations, but more for a sewer line. That's why the SLTP, that's what that stands for, a sewer line test pit, which I wouldn't have to be there for that. But as it relates to the septic tank, I did ask the engineer if he could extrapolate water maybe from a test hole I observed on one side of the septic tanks and to the other side of the septic tanks, but he was not able to do that. I think especially before April 30th, if they're willing to go out and do witness deep holes, that would help resolve some of the issues of, one, not having witness test in the septic tank area, and two, the different evaluations by the engineer and myself in respect to where the leaching field's going, the septic field. They possibly could dig at least one more deep hole down there. We can observe it maybe with a Tetra Tech or a board member there, see where the groundwater is at. And especially right now, groundwater is at a good level where that might be helpful. But again, I don't know how we're ever going to resolve the situations of having log tests that are different from each other. I have never had this issue
Yeah.
back to working with this engineer before it all of a sudden showed up here.
And I think it goes to the larger issue here that, like, you know, Mark's acting there as a representative of the town, and the board relies on your information. And if we can't correspond that, you know, or reconcile that with the engineer, it becomes difficult for us to make a determination. And I think we note here that maybe that's not a huge issue, but at the same time, like, we need to feel confident that the decisions we're making are based on data we trust. Which isn't to say somebody's right or wrong, it's just they're different, right? So I don't know what to say there. It's just odd.
They're different, but maybe, I don't know, the groundwater is a little tangent, or what I'm going to say is tangential to this issue that we're talking about. But there's also been differences of opinion about what the soil types are, which then influence the hydraulic conductivity and the mounding and the fate and transport of the nitrogen.
Yeah.
Again, nitrogen not being the only important contaminant that is present in septic effluent, but it's just the marker by which to measure other things. So, so there's been a difference of opinion on soils, and I know in my time on the board, I've never seen that happen on a site where the agent and the engineer don't, or other consultant working on the site, they're not always engineers, but haven't come to agreement on that. And Mark's been doing this a very long time, and I don't know, Mark, have you experienced this kind of situation with others?
No, but now thinking back, there was a point in time where we were signing each other's soil test logs before leaving the field up on Great Rock Road. It was a location where they didn't have enough soil, but the engineer, who was never out at the site, was trusting the data. And this goes back to like the late 80s, early 90s. So we did everything in pen, and we signed each other's soil test books. And unfortunately, that's the only time I've ever had that happen. But I mean, that's a resolution. But again, I've worked with this engineer doing this site work, and I never saw the need for us to do that. But unfortunately here it showed up, and you know, maybe we have to do that whenever we go back out in the field.
Right. And so in terms of experience too, you've been doing this a long time and a lot of observations on
Yes.
test pits.
Yeah,
and
I'm
in a way,
licensed.
I would imagine year for year you do more of this than people installing, because it takes a lot more time for them to design systems and do the research, whereas you're going out to appear for these critical efforts and verifications. So, and I recall going out to the sites where there were professors from UMass and soil science, and there have been a whole host of engineers that you work with. So it's just strange that we have this issue where there's such a, I mean, the difference of opinion is fairly slight in the grand scheme of things, but it still affects the way that things calculate out.
Correct, and
that's
you'll
going
see
to
that.
come up with the soil absorption system for this next.
I was just going to say, you'll see it in item number 5 here.
I was going to say we're slowly backing our way into item number 5.
Yes, but it does make a difference, you know, to be accurate on the type of soil in the groundwater. And, you know, unfortunately, we disagree. We agreed to disagree, that being the engineer and I, on our soil test logbooks.
So they agree to disagree. For me as a board member with a obligation to uphold the regulations and make sure that things are done properly, and you are the authority acting on behalf of the town. And I don't see any reason to take an applicant's data over your data.
Yeah. And if they disagree,
we have to make a call, because we can't just put it in the middle. It doesn't work that way. We can't average. So we have to pick one or the other. I just don't see a reason to pick
No, and it could
Not
easily be
worth it.
resolved with another deep hole in the area of the soil absorption system, with it being witnessed by the engineer. And I would ask another witness be with me, and we're both soil evaluators. We're both licensed soil evaluators, and then just making sure everything is accurate according to that test hole, which could be compared to the others. And as I say, the size of that system could change, as noted in number 5,
Yeah.
if it is truly a sandy loam to a loomy sand to a sandy loam, as noted in Title 5, and I quoted the sections.
Mhm.
And I think in the end, like as a board, we rely on you, Mark, as the representative of the town. And furthermore, I think that if there is a debate, it seems like we should take the more conservative approach. And so I think it's hard for us to move past this either, without either sort of resolving it or agreeing that, while we disagree, we're going to be more conservative about it.
And Title
What
5 takes the
happened
same
at
approach.
Greenwood recently
Exactly.
was the
Yeah.
taking the more conservative approach, which is recommended by DEP. And it happens, the disagreements on the soil classification are I think in all cases, Mark, town's interpretation is the more conservative interpretation.
Correct. And
Agreed.
as
And
would
not skewed that way, but that's what you're seeing, and you are seeing it as being something that be more.
That's correct. That's the way we were trained. Title 5 takes the same approach. This is all based on Title 5. And, we, as you said, Greenwood, same situation happened there, where there was some disagreement on the type of soil, and the engineer went forward and agreed that we would use the more conservative approach and use a Class 2 soil. Just to help out with that, Title 5 designates the type of class soils, and with that, they designate the loading rate for the size of the system. And a 5 minute per inch rate can either be a Class 1 soil or a Class 2 soil. And I think we had some literature on this too. This is definitely not beach sand, and it's definitely not all sand. So this is where I feel it's a Class 2 soil. It's got a mix of some sand in the material, but it also has loam, and that's why it's a loomy sand to a sandy loam, and that's where the Class 2 soil comes into place. And you'll see the rate does change from 0.74 gallons per day per square foot to 0.6, and that was the approach they took on Greenwood Street. So I don't see why they wouldn't want to take the same approach here, but I don't know engineering wise if it's going to affect the size of it will affect the size of the system, but will they have enough space to do it? I don't know. That's up to the engineer to determine.
All right. And then I think finally the groundwater flow. Who wants to tackle this one?
I'll just mention what's lit off here is that in response to our or other requests for better evaluation of groundwater flow direction, the responses have often pointed to that they put in monitoring wells in accordance with Board of Health standards. So our standards are aimed at figuring out where groundwater is in the area of the soil absorption system. And often they're put in to supplement what was observed in the test pits, especially if there were models anyway, because that's what we'd prefer to find as evidence of where historic high groundwater had reached. And so they're put in kind of as a backup and to look at changes over time, sort of thing, all for purposes of understanding the area, just that area. But it's not as precise. Sometimes the wells are a little slanted and what have you, and they're not. It's a perforated pipe. They're usually wrapped, I believe, right, Mark, in fabric, but they're not precision.
Yeah,
measuring.
they don't always wrap them in fabric. Sometimes they'll use a solid pipe. But
Okay.
correct. If it's a perforated pipe, it would be wrapped in silk silt type area, and that actually we require that if it's perforated.
Okay, so doing that as part of the testing in the SAS area has nothing to do with determining groundwater flow direction. I guess that's the easier point, is it's got a different purpose of why it's there. Groundwater flow direction, you want triangulation. You want to get a sense of not a change just between 2 points, but 3 points will give you a better sense, right, of where it's tipping and facing, flowing. And they haven't done that. And you need to know that groundwater flow direction for understanding mounding better, but especially for the nitrogen loading, the area of impact. You know, where's that plume going to go to? You have to know that groundwater flow direction. So they've been assuming that the water is flowing towards the wetlands, which, yeah, probably, but it's not clear that it's going directly west, unless their assumptions are claiming now, because there are a number of low points in wetlands, even if that was the only metric. And they were using a very odd a boring log from the property at 53, which had a depth to groundwater seemingly of 5 feet. But that was, if you recall, well, Matt, you recall from the discussion about whether the well was installed properly, because that depth to groundwater in the well, depth to water level, a static water level in the well, was above the bedrock level.
Yeah.
And so question of either it was being influenced by the overburdened groundwater or it had some artisanal properties, and so the water was just basically being pushed up, which is what the well driller claimed, and Mass DEP says they saw frequently. So that was not a reliable measure of overburdened groundwater depth. And that was a major factor in what they used to determine groundwater levels. I don't know how much they used in the flow, but it was odd rather than putting in 3 wells into groundwater. And then you compare their depths to one another. So again, we're left with something that might, maybe what they've assumed so far could be correct, but not reliably.
And so I think, I mean, the overall summary from this is that we just are lacking so much that we are, I think, nowhere near being able to make a judgment on this. I just don't know what I was going to say something else, but I don't know what else to say. Like, we're not, I mean, I think we're nowhere close to being able to evaluate this.
And we've been asking this general set of questions for quite some time.
Yeah.
And we're at an impasse.
But Daryl, we've also gotten validation from the peer reviewer that the concerns that we have had on many of these issues, with only 1 or 2 exceptions, is exactly concerns that they have. And their advice was more or less that this needs to be redone. What I wanted to suggest, and this is just to bounce it off the board, is a recommendation to the ZBA that a third party be retained in order to perform the hydraulic conductivity testing and then the subsequent nitrogen loading analyses. Given that, I think at this point, the nature of the conflicts that we are seeing here with the observed data, the methodology, I think for complete confidence for this board to be able to proceed with the determination, we need to have, at least I personally feel like I need to have a third party come in and perform this work. I don't know what anyone else thinks about that. I know the ZBA can take it or leave it, but that is my feeling.
I agree with that, and we did put in a request to ZBA, asking whether, not a request to actually do it, asking whether it was possible to have the peer reviewer carry out these two analyses, the mounding and the nitrogen loading evaluations,
And if I can add to,
or
it,
standard methodologies.
no, and I agree with everything that was just said. And I just want to go back to a point I made, and that is that the monitor pipes that are placed in open to the environment do need to have the silk sock or the silk fabric around the pipe. And we also know crushed stone or sand around that so it doesn't clog. So you get to see the groundwater flowing and how it flows in the area. So when they use the solid pipes, that's typically when they just want to go back out and make sure the groundwater is not too high for installation. That's when they find models. That's when they can use the solid pipe. That's only for that purpose. But for this purpose and in our codes, you would need to use a perforated pipe with silk fabric so you can get the flow of that water and know how it's filling up and moving at the same time versus the flow could be impeded going into the monitor pipe if it was solid. So I just wanted to correct that to some degree so the board knows.
Thanks, Mark.
And they don't have to do, if they do any future monitoring, they don't have to be done by test pits. They can be driven wells or drilled wells. And just more shallow than, obviously not into bedrock, because we're trying to evaluate the overburdened groundwater. And the other thing I'll say is I didn't hear back from ZBA yet on whether it's possible for the peer reviewer to do it. So I like Julie's suggestion that it could be just a third party peer reviewer or otherwise.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. And I guess whether sort of a vote of us would carry more weight too than a sort of request for the peer reviewer. I think if the board votes and says we recommend to ZBA that a third party perform these analyses, then I think that carries a little more weight. So I think we should do that. And then I think also just discussion of timeline. We're meeting tonight because they're meeting on Wednesday to discuss this. Where are we in the timeline on this project?
The extension was through this Wednesday.
Right.
But this is the second extension Daryl, do I have that right? I'm sorry, they're starting to conflate in my mind. I believe this is the second extension on this project.
Yes, yes.
And while I guess I don't want to dig into it too deeply, I would not be surprised if there's an additional extension because I saw a document posted today with a totally different plan for this property. But we have no details about that. So all we can do is act on this.
And we did respond to the submittal of February 6th. They submitted a septic plan. We haven't seen a revised septic plan since then, but we have sent out deficiency letters to the applicants. So in respect to Title V on that 45 days, we're within the 45 days and actually we're waiting on a revised septic plan as required in our deficiency letters, just so time-wise, so you know how we stand at the Board of Health level.
So I think to sort of the summary remains, we are missing data to make determinations on many things, not the least of which is a revised septic plan. And so we can't sort of move forward on sort of much of our recommendations to the ZBA, but I think what we can do is what Julie suggested. So let's make that a motion. And so do I have a motion to recommend to the ZBA that a third party carry out the analysis of groundwater and mounding and nitrogen loading calculations?
And hydraulic conductivity.
Yes.
What you said in there, Matt, I'm sorry.
I think I didn't, so thank you for adding it.
Okay.
So do we have that motion?
So moved.
So moved. Oh, second.
Any discussion on that? Hearing none, Matt Beavers, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
Any other actions to take at this point? I mean, I think there's not. I think the main point here is that we cannot take much action because we're lacking information.
Also, I've let Mass DEP know that we'd like to be kept abreast of whatever developments take place on the possible provisional use approval for Septitech Star engineered systems.
Huh. Any other discussion on Farm Road?
No, I think that's everything I had to cover.
All right. I think if nothing else, I think our next. Oh, I see chat. Sorry.
Yeah,
I think
that was the one.
this time.
yeah, the answer to that is the board reviews what's before us.
Yeah. And so if things change, then we need to start at the beginning again. All right. So I think the next item on our agenda was the Washington Street 40B discussion. Do we have any updates on that? I haven't seen much else come through on the town website or directly to us in terms of documentation for this, unless I'm missing something.
I'll mention just two things that caught my attention. And the engineer for the septic was mentioning that the system had general use approval for the IA technology, but it's another Septitech Star engineered system. So it doesn't want it, at best, it would have provisional use approval for the over 2,000 gallons, and the engineered system aspect, which is again combining multiple units, has not yet been approved. So that just concerned me that they weren't aware of that. And they mentioned, and this is more for the benefit of anyone who might have been attending that, they mentioned that the quality of the water coming out of that system would be 5 times better than a regular septic system. And that's a very odd metric to propose when you have reductions of a few parameters. BOD, TSS, and nitrogen are known to be done, and they're reduced by like 25 to, I forget, 50% or something like that. So that's not 5 times, number one. And there are myriad of potential contaminants, like pharmaceuticals are the most notorious because they're so widely variable in their chemical composition that around the world there have been studies done in various places about what treatments work on pharmaceuticals. And when they look at it, sometimes 100% might be reduced or 0%, and anything in between. And it depends on what the pharmaceutical is and what the process is. There's, again, because they're so variable. So, Peep, are you still having trouble hearing me? Someone's commenting. Is it too, well, I don't know.
I can hear you.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, and then any kind of cleaning chemicals or toxic chemicals might also change the effectiveness of the treatment system. So that was a sound good claim, but odd number.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, it's like everything else, lacking in enough detail to have any real meaning.
Or zooming in on one parameter.
Right. But who knows what that parameter is? And then they're giving us a relative rate, which is not helpful. And it's not useful information in effectively any way. And
the reason nitrogen gets highlighted by a lot of IA technologies is because it is something very clearly associated with septic, but it is by no means the only thing associated with septic systems. And septic systems do a great job on biological issues, bacteria and viruses and what have you. Not so good on nitrogen just because it's it is harder to do. And then for the other set of chemicals that might be used in homes, very variable.
Any other comment or update on Washington Street? I mean, I think it's mostly just waiting for details.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's correct. I agree with Daryl. They're looking at using the star 2 units, so it's a star 9.0. And again, it falls under provisional engineered system, hasn't been proven yet. My concern is these may be their first. I don't have any information that says this has been tested in other towns in Massachusetts. I don't know if we're going to be the first town for these provisional systems, but it is concerning.
Mark, is that something we can, I mean, DEP has to track that. Can't we find for the over 2,000, what other
Yeah,
towns?
I think it was asked and we never received a comment. I think they've told us to seek out the contractor that sells these units, so we could do that to see if they have any others in the state.
Because they have under the they have an obligation to follow for the first, I think it was 36 months, or I have it written down someplace.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe it's
3 years.
36 months and the first 50 systems going in. So are we the first of the 50 systems going in under provisional use for the STAR technology, engineered into, double the system, or in the case of the other property, the 3 systems put together? It's going to be interesting to see how this proceeds. And if we are the first, it'll be, as you said earlier, is there a backup? If they fail, they have to have a backup, and another nitrogen reduction type system.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember seeing that
And
in Washington either. But the ownership structure is a little easier. Yeah.
so
Go
for
ahead.
clarification, the 3-year testing period begins when the septic system is installed, which can be very different from full use, the loading of it. Because the septic system has to go in early, right? The water supply and then the septic system. And you build the units. So if it takes a few years for all units to be built and occupied, the testing period could be close to done by the time the loadings are really beginning. Although it goes to a quarterly testing period. So there is some, but again, that was for the provisional use, less than 2,000 gallons. I don't know what it would be for these.
Yeah, and that goes under the O&M for the owner. Yeah. We have a community question comment. Do you want to take that?
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Thanks, Matt. I just wanted to mention, I do think I read through the Septitech operations manual and it's incredibly complicated. And so I think, the ownership of whether it's at Farm Road for a homeowner association or if it's an owner for a rental building, it's going to be incredibly complicated to comply with that. I think it also puts a lot of burden on the local Board of Health. So just an observation after reading through what seemed like a really complicated 12-page manual on how to operate the system. Thanks.
Thanks.
Say that the usual thing is that for those systems, they have to have in place a contract with service provider.
And it's
That's
certified.
one of the requirements.
And they have to be a specifically certified provider for this exact system. In my reading of the 12-page service manual too, Mary. Yes.
Yeah, it was a fun read, right?
I enjoyed it.
Book club. Nerds book club. I
Oh
see
my
Matt
God. All right,
raising
we
his
have to
hand for
stop.
that
We
one.
have to stop this, right? We have to stop.
Did Daniel Steele write it?
Oh, God.
Caller.
All right. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay. Um, All right, I think the only item left on our agenda for the evening then is our agenda for the 3rd. This is where I ask Ellen what's on the agenda for the 3rd.
Right, I don't know anything
Variance is coming up, we don't know.
other than probably Washington Street and who knows, maybe Farm Road.
Yeah, I think it's probably safe to assume Farm Road will not be settled on Wednesday. So my guess is that we should leave that on the agenda. And we should leave Washington on the agenda because maybe we'll have more info by then.
I believe we have a variance hearing as well. I think it's 32 in the wood.
Okay. Anything anybody else wants to add?
Hopefully a staffing update.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then Daryl, will you follow up with if the Charles River Health District has any help and minutes that they can lend us?
Yes. I hope I will have happy news on that front.
Okay. So we have a meeting April 3rd. And then that is our only April meeting on the books for right now, right? So we traditionally take that week of that 3rd week of April off. So if something comes up, we can add a meeting, but for now it's April 3rd.
All right. I assume that's still the school vacation week?
It is indeed.
Okay. So we try not to do it because people can't as easily attend meetings if they want to.
Or vacation and attend meetings? Yeah. All right,
All right. Motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
I'm sure no discussion of that. Matt Beavers, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Carol Beardsley, aye.
All right. See you in a couple
Thank you.
weeks.
Good
Everyone.
night, everyone.
Night.
Bye.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, you're welcome.